Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist/secular/awesome community. This is episode number 171. I recorded this interview live on December 3rd, 2018. And if you're wondering where the gong sound is, well, can't we just have a few things in life that we just anticipate and it might happen pretty soon. Thank you to Deborah and Jeannie for talking about the issues of the day a couple weeks ago. Sorry I was out last week. Good thing we clear up the whole ICE thing, and I'm looking forward to Robert Mueller's 25th trimester of inquiry. Kevin Francis is the co-host of the Leftatvalley podcast. He and his Canadian co-hosts were smart enough not to pigeonhole themselves into solely a religious discussion, but that surely comes up. The latest episode I listened to was a debate between Robert Stanley of Right to Reason and a Christian who I think went by Christensen, who is an apologist but still debated that Christianity allows you to reason. We talked about what a Canadian drinks who doesn't drink booze, what it was like to do an episode high, because pot is legal in Canada now, and why we need ongoing reminders that Ronald Reagan indeed sucks. Enjoy.
Sorry I spanked your boy, Homer.
Woohoo! In your face, puss! I apologize for the taxi.
Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast. That's right, the gong. We even did it twice by accident. Oh, I have a gong story, but I'll probably share that separately outside of the show. Welcome to the show, Kevin Francis. How you doing?
Greetings from North, greetings from Canada, and greetings to all your listeners. It's nice to be here, guys.
Yeah, he's such a nice guy. But, you know, Canadians, they have to be nice. I don't know what it is. I don't know how that happens, but we were going to do a show later this week. I had a job interview today, and I just wasn't even thinking about the show, but I didn't do one last week, and I was like, I got to do a show. So, yeah, he was nice enough to come on and chat. So we're going to talk about your show. So you're like, how many episodes now?
Well, actually, we just did a 200 episode, and just to answer your question, the reason why Canadians are nice is because most Americans are armed, and we're not. So we already know that, and since you guys have Donald Trump now, we also legalize weed just so we can deal with you guys now.
That pretty much says it all.
How you doing, Zach?
Doing good. Celebrating, although I'd say I celebrated my pre-interview because I had one yesterday too, but the Dragon's Milk is out.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. Milk of the Dragon. Every time I stray and try another beer and cheat on Dragon's Milk, I just realize how much I love it. It's what they drink in Michigan instead of water.
Mm-hmm.
And you're having a lovely Canadian tea up there?
Actually, no, I'm just drinking iced tea, I guess. Not no regular tea, just iced tea. Keep it nice and simple.
But not like Southern iced tea that's like 40% sugar, right?
I don't know. It's just brisk iced tea, whatever that is. It's almost like pop, so pretty much the same thing.
So do we get mad at Canadians now when you're not high, or is that...
I should have pulled out the bong, I guess. No, I guess, we've legalized weed now across the country since October 17th, so we even did a show recently on that, and that was kind of an experience. I'm a bit of a big dork myself. I never could say I'm really a user of weed, so I've had about 2-3 experiences, and they've all been kind of weird. So, yeah, we did a show not too long ago where we actually decided to light up a joint and a bong hit just before the episode started, and we had, thank goodness, Nancy, one of my co-hosts, who was sober and could keep us on the leash. It was weird, man. Tell you, halfway through the show there, I'm interviewing a guy. His name is Ryan, and Rich. And he's a nice guy, and he's taking us through the steps by step because he's used to medical marijuana, and I could not focus to save my life. I couldn't remember the guy's name. I couldn't remember what his medical issue was. Yeah, it was an experience.
Seems like as someone who's done process documentation, that to do it while high is probably not the best time.
No, probably not.
While high, you definitely want to check your work.
Yeah. Well, we it's exactly what we wanted to show.
Brownie, step 4, eat a brownie.
Well, it's exactly what we wanted to do, right? We wanted to show the effects, and how different we are than our usual selves, which is kind of kooky to begin with. But I think we came across as we did a show, and it was about as unedited as I could, and we released it out there, and I think it was a good show.
But you made it up to 200, and that's something that I have, 7, 8 months in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So what made you decide, I want to do a show, a podcast, in sort of a bit of a golden era? Like, I feel like in that 2014 era, that's kind of when like a lot of shows got started.
Yeah. Well, the show is called Leftatvalley, and Lee said we just did a 200 episode. Now, do you want like the whole story, apostasy, and everything, or do you want this condensed here? Because I can go to way details.
The show, but we want to get to know about you. So your own like personal religious background would be a good kind of foundation for it as well.
In the beginning, okay. Well, actually, like a lot of people that are French Canadians and back east, I was raised Catholic. Came from a Roman Catholic family. I was a good Catholic boy. I even went to Catholic school during my high school years. I never liked the church. I hated my mother forced me to wear that horrible sweater and had to wake me up on Sunday, and we had to go to church. And the best part of the week was just the 2 hours after you got out of church. My apostasy started happening around in my teen years. I was a bit slow on this because I was listening to church and the sermons, and you have all this, they're singing, they're standing, they're kneeling, they're praying, and then they're sitting, they're listening to a sermon. And it was so robotic. And I was listening to the hymns, and it was so, to me, it felt so forced. And I can remember that moment where I looked around in church and I thought, my gosh, nobody actually believes in this. Is it just me? And nobody actually believes in this. And that was my first revelation of apostasy. I mean, it was a hell of a revelation because I actually loved the story of the Bible. I actually read the Bible by then, and to me it was almost like mythology. I loved the stories, and people were telling me they were real, but it wasn't. One of my favorite stories was, of course, Samson the judge, right? With his long hair and his super strength, he was like the Christian version of Hercules. And the Jonah and the fish, those were fantastic stories. And they were telling me this was real. So, what's that noise? So move forward in my...
There will be, I suppose.
So move forward, and then my second revelation was during my high school year, and the Iraqi War, the first Iraqi War happened. And our chemistry teacher, came into the class, and he was a bit of a religious man. And even though this was a secular school, he wasn't supposed to do anything like that. He basically said that he called Saddam Hussein the little Hitler of the 20th century, and he basically decided to lead the class in prayer. And I can remember, out of reflex, of course, doing the sign of the cross, out of pure reflex, and I just stopped halfway through, and I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed for having done that. I thought, oh my God, I hope nobody else saw me do this. And that would pretty much started cementing my apostasy at that point. I realized, no, I don't believe in Jesus. And then I went into the woo period, there has to be a God, there has to be a force. But anyway, it took me a while. Move forward many, many years, and I started showing I was always a bit of an activist. I started showing documentaries to the public for free, and I usually had a guest to come discuss what was going on, what's happening to our rivers, what's happening to the streets, is the oil going to crash, blah, blah. And I couldn't help but notice that all these problems were blamed on greed of society, and they were tied to this one line in the Bible, because a lot of these chief captains of industries who were religious at the time would start saying things like that one line in Genesis that basically says man has dominion over the earth. And I thought, wow. I said, there's the true enemy. It was the ancient influence of religion, which it was still would spread in today's world and still had influence. So then I started looking up videos, and I stumbled upon a video of Christopher Hitchens. Bless him. And he was already dead by then. And I was just completely fell in love with the man. I mean, he was so fearless. And then I just started devouring these videos on YouTube, and then Dawkins came along. And then I found Seth Andrews' show, The Thinking Atheist. And then I started hearing about this thing called podcasting. I said, oh my God, this is amazing. I thought podcasting was great because it's the closest thing we have to immortality when you think about it. I mean, you had a conversation with your grandfather, I'm sure, but do you really know how he felt about the subjects of his day? No. I mean, you had a little chit-chats here and there. It's about as much as you really know. But with podcasting, it's out there forever. 20 years from now, somebody's going to look up great-great-great-uncle Zach's thought, and they're still going to be there. But you can't actually say that about previous generations. So I started listening to a whole bunch of podcasts, and I thought, wow, some of these podcasts really, really suck. I'm sure I could do better than that. Well, it turns out I can't. But anyway, I tried. That's how the show really started. And that's how now we're up to 200 episodes. In a nutshell.
But what was the initial kind of, I guess, idea for doing the show? And do you remember, I guess saying the date would be too specific, but around when it did start?
It was in March. I could look up the date because I have all the episodes in it, but it was in March, we're coming on our 5th year now. We started bi-weekly. We didn't do it at the time. I started that with an old girlfriend. And we wanted to give an atheist flavor to the show, but also talk about other subjects, not just atheism, because there's only so much you can say about atheism before you start really repeating yourself. We wanted to discuss political situations, what was going on with this, and debunking and stuff like that to really bring truth. And so we tried to be informative and a bit funny and to really put our voice out there in the conversation. That was really the catalyst. And like I said, the big thing is when I was listening to other shows, and shows that were like pretty popular, but I thought they really sucked. I thought, geez, really? This is really popular? So I had to give it a shot. So essentially, that's how we did start the show. And then about a year into our show, Nancy, which we call the assassin on our show, little Nancy, she's a little Jewish woman, and she's just a fantastic pearl of a woman, joined in, and she's been with us ever since. A lot of people have come and gone. They come, they do a point as much as they can, but then life changes and takes them somewhere else. So right now, we're down to four of us. There's me, Nancy, Christina, and Kirsten. They're like our 2 youngest, and the millennials. So we have different generations, Nancy being the senior generation, me being Generation X, and then we have our 2 millennials.
What do you consider kind of like the, I guess, elevator pitch of the current version of the show? I don't know how dramatically it's changed since the beginning, but shows change because people change. Yeah,
the basic formula hasn't changed that much. We're essentially an interview-based show. The second half of the show is usually an interview that we do either with podcasters that we like to try to promote, because let's face it, between podcasters and between atheists, we got to help each other. We like to interview scientists. We like to interview authors. It's almost it's an interview-based show like that, and we try to bring in some. The first half of the show is we talk about current events, quick thoughts about what's going on here and there. We have a segment called Another Brilliant Moment, brought to you by Religion, where we just take news stories about religion and we kind of laugh at them a bit. We used to have a segment called This Day in History, where we look back at history, but on this day, this and this happened. And now we have a segment called the Top 10. So we usually go through a list of top 10 things that go various topics whatsoever. Could be top 10 destinations for a vacation, or it could be top 10 best cities in the U.S. or whatever. Essentially.
What's the usual length of each episode?
Yeah, we usually run between an hour 15, an hour and a half, maybe a bit an hour 45 once in a while. We rarely run above that. You don't want to be out there for 5 hours. As much as we'd love to interview our people for 5 hours, eventually people need a life too.
I don't know. I tend to see in like YouTubes that those tend to go really, really long. It's a 6-hour discussion. And you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and there is a segment of the population that likes that. And I think for podcasters, I think we will quickly realize you cannot please everybody. You just can't. You try your best, but there's people, the same people that will say, oh, your show's too long, and then some people say, well, your show's too short, right? So you just got to pick something and kind of stick with it.
It does seem like no matter what topic you're talking about, there are probably 20 podcasts, and then when it comes to atheists, there are a lot of podcasts like it. You have to find the topic you like, and then you have to find the actual hosts that you like. Like if they're talking about a certain topic and then you think, what if they're talking about something I'm not interested in? Would I still want to listen? And then that's when you go, oh, okay, I think I like this show. Just when people are just kind of joking around and they're not talking about the subject, then you're going, okay, I think I might be onto something.
Yeah. During the year, I interviewed Seth Andrews again. And I asked him if he had a piece of advice for other podcasters, because after all, in atheist podcasting, he's kind of like the grandfather of us all. Excuse me. And he said one of the things you have to do, and this is from his radio days, is to make sure the audience realizes that you appreciate their time, right? I mean, after all, they do download your show, and you do spend an hour listening or whatever time listening to you, and you take an hour of their time away, and they need to know that you appreciate that. And I think that's maybe something we don't do enough, to thank the audience for actually being there, because you really don't have to. There's, like you said, there's a plethora of voices out there. They could be listening to just about anything, anywhere. So you got to make it worth their while for them to tune in, especially if they're going to try to tune in every episode or so.
Well, do you think you do the kind of show that you want to listen to? Is it like the kind of show that you would listen to in your own time?
Well, I think so. I mean, essentially, like I said, you can't please everybody, right? So you try to do the show as you think would be fun. There was a while there on our show, I like to do sound effects and drops and stuff like that, Having a conversation, say, Zach's saying something, and all of a sudden you have a say, what, in the back, right? And I kind of went overboard with that. And then I realized that people weren't liking it. So even though I like it, I had to adapt myself, say, okay, tone it down, because your listeners are not necessarily liking that much, and that's just a question of personal preference. I am doing the show for them, but I'm also doing the show for myself too. So we have to reach an equilibrium and say, hey, okay, I'm happy with the show. I hope you're happy with it too, without saying, hey, screw that if you're not.
Well, do you have in the time you've done the show, and of course I can't do like asking someone for their favorite kid.
Yeah.
Some of the like favorite guests you've had or guests you've had on that may have surprised you just during your time, and then like anybody that you may have not gotten on yet that you would want to. I mean, obviously you can't get Christopher Hitchens, but
No, of course not. And of course it'd be great to get like huge names and all that, but I mean, let's be realistic. These people have limited time and limited access, right, too. Favorite shows, they're so various. I'm fairly fond of our Halloween special. Our Halloween special is, instead of doing an interview, what we usually do is we just set up a virtual campfire and we tell ghost stories, essentially, And I asked my co-host to make up a story and just use your best storytelling voice and start telling the stories. I'm pretty fond of those. We had so many fantastic guests, and that's a great thing about this world of podcasting. It really has changed my life personally, because I realized that I never would have met these people otherwise. We've interviewed people like Eli Bosnick of God Awful Movies, and the amazing Randy, Matt Dillahunty, even Lawrence Krauss before the problems happened. Our show has had a surprising amount of really, really, really good interviews, and a lot of good friendships have also developed from simply talking to people like that, and they return the favor. They say, hey, Kev, by the way, I've got this guest for you. I think it'd be great on your show. And, like Robert Stanley is a perfect example of that. We've become very good friends. And even though we've never actually met in person, he's down in Texas, I'm up here in Canada. So it's been a hell of a roller coaster ride for sure.
Now you actually we'll do a little behind the scenes here.
Sure.
When I said, hey, you want to be on the show, you said, hey, we have an opening on February 9th.
Yeah.
I had to check my calendar to make sure. I'm like, am I going to still be alive then? And I'm like, hey, can you be on in like 4 hours? That's kind of the difference there. So is it difficult to do the advanced scheduling, or is that the only way to stay sane when you're needing to do a regular show?
No, it's not. People usually like to have advance warning. You just got to make sure that when you're booking people, like right now we're booking in February. We got Matt Dillahunty that's coming for us in February. You got to make sure that at least a week before the show happens, to give him a reminder. And you also have to sometimes expect that, especially when you're somebody like Matt, for example, there might be a book tour all of a sudden that shows up. So you have to almost be ready for that. What I like to do, if possible, I like to try to have that extra interview. So if for some reason a guest drops and I have that extra interview that's pre-recorded, then I can switch that one. Right? The only thing it kind of sucks when I say, well, next week we'll have Matt Dillahunty with us. And then Matt's a no-show and I'm interviewing Joe Schmo. That really kind of sucks, but unfortunately those are the things.
My name is Zach Law, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Zach Law. By the way, the comments of Kevin are not necessarily those of Zach Law and his podcast.
They might be better, so it's perfectly acceptable. Yeah, Matt isn't a guy I've had on, although I did meet him. He did a debate here. I mean, I'm sure it was like 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was like a pastor who was not ready.
Yeah.
Like Atheists on... Was it Atheist on? No, it wasn't. Atheist Experience is the one.
Yeah.
Or still does.
And Matt is a surprising kind of guy. I met him in person, and I interviewed him once a couple of years ago for... excuse me. He was up here in Canada, and he was doing a conference, and I happened to walk to him, and I said, hey, Matt, and I had my little recorder and all that, and he was very gracious to grant us an interview. Took about 20 minutes of his time. It was kind of funny because I always got the impression that Matt was never super comfortable with crowds. And the way he was acting in the middle of a crowd seemed kind of almost standoffish. But as soon as I got into a little comfy room with just Matt, and it was just him and I, he just turned like a switch there. He just turned into the Matt Dillahunty we all know. So people kind of surprise you like that, little things you learn about them. Right? Seth Andrews, for example, Seth is great because Seth is a huge fan of coffee. So if you want to get on Seth's good side, you bring him coffee. So every time he shows up, I usually bring him a bag of coffee beans from the local region and he just takes it and smells it and says, so right there, I'm on his good side. Jerry Coyne brought him a bottle of Canadian Crown Royal, stuff like that. You do all these kind of things. People really, really surprise you, and you have the persona, and you realize that, they say never meet your heroes. For the most part, that hasn't been the case with me and the people I've met. They've just all been fantastic, fantastic people. I can really count of all the interviews we've done on the show, I might count less than 5 people that I would not bring back.
It's a pretty good percentage.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not going to name them there, but I mean, people that, I had for a guy for an interview. He's a popular guy, he's a popular podcaster and all that, but he just seems so completely disinterested in the interview whatsoever. I'm thinking, wow, I was really not expecting that. I was expecting him to be much more engaged, but he just wasn't there. But he could have been having a bad day, I guess. But it happens too, right? People are people.
Yeah, I guess when you get a lot of podcast reps, you have one of those where you kind of get that feeling like, okay, I'm going to have to pull something out of this person to get him to give me some good answers, or
Yeah, exactly.
Told 400 times before, it's probably hard to do that and make it sound fresh. But okay, so usually I ask the question, like, when people listen to your show, do you recommend they do it while drinking? But of course, when you're in Canada, would you do it while smoking pot? Not while operating heavy machinery.
Usually I tell people that the best time to listen to a podcast is probably when you're driving from point A to point B. You're in your car and you put that on the radio. That usually works. I usually say it's great background music too when you do the dishes. Of course, if you're just enjoying a joint and you're sitting on the couch and you're just smoking and eating some munchies, by all means, put it on, right? You might hear something that we never thought of. Send us a letter, see how that went out. Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of kooky enough as it is. I mean, we did a show with a podcast called the Brainstorm Podcast, and that was in Canada, but out of
like Super Canada podcast right there.
Oh yeah, Brainstorm, yeah, with Corey Johnson, and oh my God, if you listen to that show, oh my God, we went all out. We were joking about microphone blowjobs and stuff like that the whole time. It was just, oh my God, nonstop craziness, nonstop.
Microphone blowjob. Okay, is that a technical term I've missed out on?
You'll have to listen to the show to figure it out. Great guy too, Corey Johnson, great guy.
I'm just going to send him that message on Facebook Messenger and see what he says.
Yeah, well, you might have to refresh his memory. That was in April, so it's been a little while already.
He's the kind of guy. He better remember. You better remember every guest you had, every question you've ever asked. That's how it works. That's what I hear. That's how it works these days. Okay, so you did episode 200. Did you have like a special, episode? Or did you just say we're just doing a normal episode?
No, we just did a normal episode. No celebration whatsoever. And, we just pointed out, I didn't even point out at the beginning of the show. It was only halfway through the interview that said we were interviewing this lovely couple out of Florida. And they do a podcast called Unapologetics, Brent and Nikki. And they're a great couple because she's African-American and he's a white boy. And she was the one that was raised pretty much atheist. And he came from like a complete evangelical background, which was like, whoa, I was not expecting that at all. They were absolutely adorable, both of them. They were fantastic guests. And halfway through the show, I say, oh, you know what, by the way, this is our 200th episode. So no fanfare or anything like that. Showmanship is okay at some point, but at some point you don't want to be full of yourselves either, right? You do the show for your guests, you do the show for your audience. You don't necessarily do the show for yourself.
Yeah, I've had people at podcasts. It's weird that there's some podcasts that are around the same number that I'm at. Mm-hmm. I think God Awful Movies is around the same that I am. So like they're like, oh, episode 200, we're going to do a show in like Japan. We're going to do it in the International Space Station. We're going to do a live show, and 700 people are going to show up. And I'm like, I got 2 people in the chat room, and than their 700. I'll just say that right now.
Well, you got to also the guys from God Awful Movies, which the guys are fantastic, by the way. Eli Bosnick has been a guest several times. I'm trying real hard to get Noah and Heath on, which were great guys too. We met them in Seattle. They're great guys, but these guys are also making a living at their show, right? So they do have to make some kind of a big brawl, a big fanfare to bring in more listeners. You and I are, I hate to say it, but we're a lower class of meat. We're not the same cut. Not quite. We're not there yet.
I mean, as you mentioned, getting people in advance, I think with Scathing Atheist, this was before Eli joined, mm-hmm. I just did the quote, was it the one before, the Filthy Monkey Men?
Yep.
And when I submitted it, I was like, hey, you guys want to be on the show? And then 3 months later, he's like, oh, I saw that email, and okay. So, yeah, they're ones that are delayed. I'm pretty sure when I had Arn Ra on, it was a 2 or 3 month thing, and I had to remind him. He was like, oh, sorry, this night's been booked already. Yeah, we had to redo it, but that's the way it is. Yeah, there's a level of, okay, fine, we'll say the us is maybe we'll be a guest on a show once or twice a month, and we do our show, and that's it. And maybe we make a few bucks off of it. And then there's the ones who do it as a second job on Cogdis types, and then Scathing Atheists, who of course are doing 17 podcasts and are living off of it. And what's there's a big difference probably between 1 and 2, but then between 4 and 5 shows, you're like, all right.
Yeah.
You just record 2 at the same time.
Yeah.
That'd probably be okay.
Well, I mean, it's you can tell that a lot of work goes into their shows, right? Writing all these jokes because they're kind of scripted for their show. A lot of work, and a lot of work on a weekly basis has to go into these shows. I understand why their schedules is a bit hard to match. It's a lot easier to get a guy like me who's basically sitting around here watching Godzilla on TV, right? So what you call or something like that. So it's a lot easier to do that than to get some of these guys.
Sounds like living the dream. So you have an actual on-air, because for the people who aren't actually watching this behind you, that's a pretty cool. I need one of those.
Yeah. Old girlfriend gave that to me as a gift.
So people will know, like, that thing, you could probably see that from space. It's pretty bright.
Yeah. Usually people talk about the egg beaters hanging from the ceiling, but that's okay. You haven't seen them yet.
Now, I don't know if people know this, but Canada is a different country from the United States.
Yes.
So what is it like the atheist community in your area? Because you said you're in Vancouver, so I think I can technically call you a Canuck, because I think that's what you can call someone from Western Canada, but please correct me. That is the name of the hockey team, so...
Yeah, it is the name of the hockey team. Although the Canuck is a generic term, the same way that we would call you Yanks. Right? It's just a generic term, really. I think it applies to all Americans like Canuck would apply to all Canadians. Canada, the great thing about Canada, we're a bit like the attic of North America. You know, you don't really think about us until you get up there and say, "Wow, look at all this stuff," right? So, Canada is I live in Abbotsford, which is actually about 45 minutes east of Vancouver. And it turns out to be the Bible Belt, the Canadian Bible Belt. And across all the country, it's got more churches. Yeah, it's got more churches per capita in this little town than anywhere else across the country. Now, I got to warn you, it's nowhere near as bad as, I don't know, Oklahoma or something like that. Nowhere near that. There is some religiosity, but there's a huge difference between the American evangelical movement and the Canadian movement. I mean, just to give you an example, there was a statistic that said about 40% of all Americans believe in creationism. Here in Canada, it's about 15%. So there's a fair difference there, which is ironic because actually in the preamble to our Constitution, there is actually an appeal to deity, while the American Constitution does not, which is a really secular document. So it's really kind of ironic that our country has an appeal to deity and you guys don't. Yeah, for the most part, that's pretty much the big difference between our two countries. Although a lot of people say, "What's a Canadian?" Well, essentially, it's an unarmed American with health care.
Which would be lovely, since I'm already unarmed.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
I think I cut down the average guns per person in Georgia by like 0.001.
Yeah, well, you could just come up here to Canada. We have an open policy towards Americans anyway, and you just have to remember that we have stronger beer, and hockey is better than baseball. You'll be fine.
I was like, I just drank an 11% beer. Yours could be stronger, but
well, the average
it's not even beer anymore. I think I have a beer that's like 18%, and that's like a mixed drink. Beer needs to be mostly water in theory, but I think Canada, you probably could compete with America in terms of that.
I think they're talking about the average beer, like the Budweisers and stuff.
Oh, yes, yeah. We have It's so weird that we have like it's a Belgian company, but it has to be like all American, and half of their commercials are making fun of craft beer. Yet they've like bought up all these small breweries in the country.
Yeah.
And they're making money off of this. They're making money on either way. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so since Trump was elected, how many Americans have said to you, "Hey, can I crash on your couch for a few days?"
Many.
The rest of their lives.
We've said that a lot. We've heard that a lot.
I mean, you can turn that off. Like, forget doing a podcast to make money. Like.
Yeah. Room for rent.
Just get people, at like Airbnb even. I mean, come on.
I even had a couple of women that I knew online that actually seriously proposed, "Hey, maybe we should get married." I said, "What?" No, seriously. We don't have to. We just have to pretend. It's like, wait a minute. It's a bit more of a commitment I'm willing to do here. Yeah, the whole Trump thing. God, where do I start with that? First of all, are you guys willing to apologize to the rest of the world for this this horrible thing? It's like, I don't know. It's like America went to a drunken stupor, and now you're starting to wake up and you're, oh my God, we were so drunk. I'm so sorry. What the hell happened here? Where do you start with this, man? I mean, I don't understand right now, as far as Canada is concerned, as far as the rest of the world is concerned. I know that a lot of Americans are very American-centric, and they look as to what goes on between American borders. And I think, a lot of Americans are raised like that, and that's fine. But on the international level, Trump has been nothing but a disaster for you guys. An absolute disaster. To the benefit of countries like Russia and China, of course. Because as soon as America decides, no, we're not doing this, China steps in and says, yeah, we'll do it. So they're positioning themselves really quickly here to become the number one country in the world. And I think most Americans don't realize that because they're more fixated on what's going on internally within the country. They're not realizing that on the international scale, it's really, really becoming dark. We've had a lot of politicians here that America's, of course, always been our number one trading partner, but we have a lot of politicians now that are claiming that, maybe we need to really pull back from that and start trading way more with China and start trading way more with Asia and Europe. And they've had some accord already signed for that because, we just don't think they can rely on the United States anymore. And that should be a big red flag as far as American politicians are concerned. God, we could go on this subject for a long time. Which way do you want to go with this?
Is there a way to compare, because you had a prime minister who was kind of a conservative, Stephen Harper, him compared, Trump isn't, I don't even know if I'd call him a politician, he's kind of become one. But is there any way to compare that? Because you had Harper, and now you have Trudeau, who seems more liberal, although when I look at anybody on Twitter, they get bashed no matter who they are, so it's hard to tell if anyone's good, but it feels like a relatively, you're doing better now.
Yeah, oh yeah. Harper was a conservative, and he was more one that would play with the playbook that George W. had. Trump, I don't think you can put Trump in that category. He's a separate category altogether. Harper was much more of a, not as goofy as George W., but in the same line of thinking. The old Chicago-style school of economics, the trickle-down economics and all that stuff. And for a while there, it was getting pretty dark on that side. I've always said that, to put it really simple to your audience, and these are not, they're rough numbers, but your country and my country has the same kind of divide. About one quarter to one third are conservatives. And about the rest of them are more like liberals, Democrats, progressives. So the only way that conservatives can actually win in either one of our country, there's two ways. One, they can cheat. And apparently Americans have been doing that a fair amount lately. Two, they can make sure the people are apathetic and they don't come out to vote. When your voter turnout is low, you have a better chance of having a conservative win. Which is ironic because you would think that, if you don't care about the government, and most conservatives don't say, they hate big government, then why would you put them in power with government to begin with? Same thing up here. When Harper was elected in the parliament, the voter turnout was about 33, 35%, which is dismal. It's really, really low. And when you think of that 35%, a third of that 35% actually elected the conservatives. So essentially, you had 1/9 of the country decide to favor the country for the next 4 years. When Trudeau came in, the rate was about 66%, if I remember correctly. So now 2/3 of the country decided to come out and vote. And of course, it was a red wave, which of course, in our country, the colors are reversed as to yours. So as soon as people come out to vote and they participate and they get off the couch and they're not apathetic, there is no way the conservatives can win. And I think they know that. And they do all their best to make sure you stay at home, your vote doesn't matter, they're all the same, all that bullshit. They make sure that comes out and they drum that out as much as possible. So you stay at home. It's the only way they can win. And I think right now, of course, with Trump, it feels to me like it was one of the last stronghold of the really, really white old conservatives And I think they're realizing they're on their way out.
Yeah, I think they're in terms of American politics, people talked about how there's going to be like a reckoning in the Republican Party because it looked like Trump was going to lose and then he won. But now the reckoning's on the Democratic side.
Yeah.
It's going to be kind of ugly, I think, leading up to 2020 because I don't know. I feel like we need like the next generation. Like it was really weird that in our last election in America that we had like Trump, Hillary Clinton, and Bernie, and they were all like really old.
Yeah.
It's like, where is Obama was relatively young. I think he was in his 40s when he ran. And he just kind of came out of nowhere. And it's like, we need that person, but we don't know who that is yet. And we'll probably destroy them before they even make it. But it's weird. So it is reversed. So red is
when you're
like liberal.
red for liberals here, the blue are conservatives.
Oh my god! You know what? I could deal with that. Like the toilet's flushed the other way. Oh, that's Australia. Sorry.
I was shocked in 2016. I really followed closely the election in 2016, and I was totally shocked that I still feel to this day the rightful president of the United States should have been Bernie Sanders. There's no doubt in my mind. He had the popular vote on his side. The man was filling 60,000 plus stadiums. Hillary barely had 500 people, and Trump was barely filling 1,000. There is no, if you actually go by popular vote and how people voted and who was popular, there's no way in hell it should have been anybody else but that man. And I think it would have been a good deal for you.
The actual vote that Hillary did beat. I mean, Hillary beat Bernie probably more than she actually beat Trump. But
of course she did.
But then again, tough for me. I kind of wanted in the last election. I really wanted it to be Bernie as like the independent because he's independent.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party didn't support him because he's not freaking Democrat. Like Bernie and Hillary on the left, and then Trump and whatever Cruz on the right. Like have your traditional terrible human being Republican, and then have the circus act that is Trump, and then all four of them. And I think more people would have showed up because it is tough. I don't know if it's the same in Canada. It's like when you have two people, some people just can't go out to vote. But do you do the same thing we do here? Because we like vote on Tuesday, which makes no sense whatsoever because just about everybody's working. And it's really hard to do. Like there's supposedly laws that say, hey, you can go out and vote for an hour, but some people just can't do that.
No, well...
Is it easier to vote up there, or just people, are they more politically inclined than down here?
Well, there is a law that says, don't quote me here, but I think it goes from province to province. But I think your employer has to give you 4 hours to go and vote if you were voting on a work day. Usually, I think they try to arrange for a Saturday, but depending on the date there. But by law, they allow you time to actually go and vote. But then again, to go back on your Bernie question, you're right. Hillary did get more votes than him. But then again, what happened is when people saw the quote-unquote screw job that Bernie Sanders got, and this is my opinion, of course, it's only worth that much, people decide to stay at home. It's exactly what happened. If you look at you had about 25% that came out voted Democrat, and had about 23% that came out voted Republicans, and the independents all stayed up at home. They all stayed on the couch. So you could say, yeah, they handed
in Canada because of that. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
It's hard with politics because you really want to have the quote-unquote perfect candidate that you vote in and everything's right. And then, like, people just turn politicians into saviors. Like, I've been really following, like, I did an episode of, the RFK tapes that was covering his assassination. And this, like, perfect politician who's going to save us all. Like, he was going to be that guy. And the belief that, like, Bernie was going to be that guy. I don't know. Like, is that how we're thinking now? Where we have like a person that's going to quote unquote save us? Just people give a lot of, weird biblical attributes to Trump, and he's got to be one of the least religious people in office in a long time.
That's just absolutely amazing. I think it was in one of the counties in St. Louis or St. Louis County. They had a billboard that basically the word was made flesh, and there's a picture of Trump. I mean, are you kidding me? Every Christian should be in an uproar just to watch that. And say, what? How could you possibly equate Donald Trump with Jesus? I mean, I don't even believe in the guy. I don't even believe he exists as a person. I'm outraged by this.
Truly. It is definitely truly outrageous. But before we get, of course, joke time is coming up. We'll see how this goes. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to cover? Of course, being an amazing Canadian, we'll have to get you back on. Of course, your co-host as well. But for now, you are representing, your show and all that. So let me know.
Fair enough. I really wish we'd get a bit more American listeners. I know a lot of American listeners have a tendency to go America-centric, and that's understandable. But I wish I had a bit more American listeners. I mean, you guys have the big piece of the pie. Sometimes the show feels. I wish I was a bit more in the heat of the battle with you guys, because I understand up here from up north, like I said, it's nowhere near as religious as it is down south. But there are some things that really start to worry me. When I was a child, my father used to say, when America sneezes, Canada gets a cold. It used to be true. In some aspect, there are some things like that that are still true. America has a huge influence on Canada, and also in, for example, trends. I'm seeing a lot of trends happening coming across the border, which are they're like imports from the States, and I don't like them. Creationism, for example. We've just had one of these, what's his name? Ken Ham. Ken Ham just announced he was going to open like some kind of biblical museum up here in Canada now. And creationism is starting to crawl across the border as well. And I'm really, really leery about that kind of stuff. The polarization that's been happening in the state, especially on the political level, that's starting to happen up here too. So I hope that we are not going to follow suit. I mean, it's okay to copy the United States when you do something right. When you do something which is not right, let's not make the same mistake. And I'm hoping that Canadians will be smarter than this.
Okay, well, it's joke time. Do you have a joke for the audience?
You have a joke? What kind of joke do you want? I mean, I went to see my doctor today, and he says he told me I need to stop drinking. I said, "Well, how come How come you think I need to stop drinking?" He said, "You sent me a urine sample. There was an olive in it."
Non-drinker. How can you tell a drinking joke? Come on.
Well, at my age, I've reached the age I realized that food is more important than sex. So I've installed a mirror above my kitchen table.
Oh, that's nice. Music playing in the background. Well, exactly. Well, Kevin, thank you very much for being on, especially on short notice. I do appreciate it. And you'll count yourself one more American listener, so that'll be good.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great. And if people want to follow the show, follow our Wacky Adventures, it's Left of the Valley. You can follow us at leftatvalley.com. You can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, at LETV Podcasts. You can send us a message, an email at leftatvalley@outlook.com. If you do like us, give us a 5-star review. It really helps us, helps others find the show. Do the same thing for Zach, because he works hard. The man's a hard worker. So, guys, be nice, be kind.
There's no better way to finish the show. So thank you, everybody, and good night.
Since I've achieved all my goals as president in one term, there was no need for a second.
Live read. I am going to just briefly mention I think it's a weekly happy hour that Kristi Winters and Kevin Logan do. And this week they had Destiny on. Destiny's a YouTuber who is on the left and usually debates people on the right. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that, because it wasn't, for all three of them, I've listened to tons of their material, and I feel like together it was weird. You get a super group together, sometimes you really anticipate, when certain actors are in a movie together and they've never done it, and then it was a little fizzly, but I think you should still check it out. I think I haven't been listening to as many atheist podcasts lately. Maybe I needed a break. Maybe real life was just intervening. I have listened to the first 2 Game of Thrones books in the past month, and that's like 67 hours of material. So clearly, my priorities are right. I believe this episode will come out around the time that America is having a day of mourning about George H.W. Bush recently passing away. I didn't think he was much of a president. Now, was he an evil person? Well, in 100 years, all of our presidents are going to be raked over the coals. I mean, sorry, that's happening right now. He was a moderate compared to now, but it's still the same evil playbook as far as I'm concerned. I can't wait to see how the whole laying in state thing happens with Trump. Actually, I can wait. Well, maybe not. See, it's difficult. If you want to support this show, be like Bobby Hugh Teode, Deborah Genie, and Freethinker215 and support this show on patreon.com/Zachrilege, Zachrilege. I'll give you a shout out. I'll even shout out shows you want me to shout out. Just tell me, and I'll be your guy. Follow me on Twitter, like my ZacrilegeCast page on Facebook, and send all mail to zacrilege.cast@gmail.com. Thank you to Kevin for being on tonight. If we can find a Canadian who doesn't drink, surely we can all get along. Right? Right?